You've probably seen this map too, right? It pops up on Reddit every few months, usually on r/creepy or r/maphorn. It shows two images. One is a map of missing persons. The other is a map of America's subterranean cave system. The overlap is practically identical. Caverns match the disappearances almost one for one. Most people look at it and go, "Huh, that's creepy," and then they scroll past. I used to do the same. But this time I zoomed in. I live in a rural stretch of Kentucky, deep in the foothills where the forests get thick and the roads disappear into gravel. I noticed a dense cluster of red dots right in my county, sitting directly on top of a minor cave system called the Blackwood Sinkholes. It wasn't a tourist trap like Mammoth Cave. It was a jagged scar in the woods even locals didn't really bother with. The kind of place people mentioned once and then quickly changed the subject. I showed it to my girlfriend, Jess. Calling Jess outdoorsy would be putting it lightly. She's the kind of girl who owns 3 different types of hiking boots and thinks a weekend without dirt under her fingernails is a wasted one. I'm the opposite. I stay up until 3 a.m., reading about unsolved murders and strange disappearances online. Basically being a vampire with Wi-Fi. See? It's a match. I pointed at the screen. Nobody goes missing here because they get lost. They fall in or... I wiggled my eyebrows. Something pulls them in. Jess rolled her eyes but grinned. You want to go? I want to go debunking, I corrected. We hike out, set up camp near the sinkholes, cook some real food, drink some bourbon, and see if, the Mothman shows up. It was supposed to be fun, a mix of her love of nature and my morbid curiosity. We packed up the Jeep on Friday, tents, sleeping bags, and a heavy cooler filled with marinated short ribs, plus ice for the whiskey. The hike to the Blackwood Sinks was only about 3 miles from the nearest logging road, but the terrain was brutal. The trees grew thick and wrong here, their roots twisting over the limestone ground like arthritic fingers clawing out of the dirt. By the time we found the main entrance, I was ready to collapse. The cave mouth was a horizontal slash in a limestone cliff face about 10 feet high and 30 feet wide. It looked like a mouth held open in a silent scream. A steady cold breeze flowed out of it, smelling of wet rock and old copper. The air around the entrance felt colder than the rest of the forest, like stepping into a shadow. Creepy, Jess said, dropping her pack. I can dig it. I loved this girl. We set up camp about 50 yards from the entrance, just far enough to avoid the draft, but close enough to stare into the darkness whenever curiosity got the better of us. I got the fire going while Jess set up a grill grate over the coals. We were doing this right. Slow-cooked sticky ribs slathered in a spicy bourbon sauce. Heat from the coals licked at the meat, and the smell was intoxicating. Anyone who loves barbecue knows what I'm talking about. Smoke, fat, sugar, and char. Jess was walking back from the tent with the drinks when a downdraft caught the smoke, pulling the plume low across the ground and sucking it slowly toward the mouth of the cave. The smoke curled and disappeared into the darkness. Feeding the beast, Jess joked as she handed me a solo cup half full of Knob Creek. Hope they like ribs, I laughed. We ate as sunset turned to twilight and drank as twilight gave way to pitch black. Jess put her hand on my shoulder. I thought I was about to get lucky, but then she told me to shush, and that's when I heard the silence. All day there had been a symphony of crickets, cicadas, and rustling leaves. But now the silence was thick, heavy, oppressive. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. Then the cave moaned. At first you'd mistake it for the wind, but it was too low, too long of a groan to come from any human lungs. Then it got louder, closer. Jess whispered, "Did you hear that?" It took everything I had not to tremble. She shined her flashlight toward the cliff. The beam cut through the darkness, but the cave swallowed the light like it was alive. "Probably a coyote or a bear," I muttered. But it didn't sound like a bear. It sounded congested. We started scrambling to clean up. I was tossing the bones into a trash bag when the sound changed. It wasn't moaning anymore. It was retching. A wet, hacking cough echoing from deep within the rock. Then something like a voice. Maybe it wasn't English. Maybe my mind was trying to find meaning where there wasn't any. Jess dropped the cooler lid. "The hell was that?" I grabbed the hatchet I'd used for firewood. "We're leaving. Now." "The tent? Leave it." The smell hit us before we saw them. It wasn't the sweet smoke of barbecue anymore. It was rot, rancid meat, ammonia, something musky, like a wet dog that had been dead for days. Then they came out of the cave. They weren't human. They were wrong, elongated, like humans stretched on a rack. Pale skin pulled tight over bones with too many joints. Their eyes were milky white, blind. Long, rot-stained teeth jutted from low-hanging jaws that were too wide, too loose. And there were 3 of them. 2 crawled on the ground. The third limped in a jerky, insect-like motion. They went straight for the grill. One grabbed the scorching hot grate with a bare-clawed hand. It didn't even flinch as its skin sizzled. It brought the meat to its face and groaned, licking the grease with a tongue that was too long and too black. "Don't move," I whispered. The creature turned its head. It wasn't looking at us. It was blind, but it was searching for us. It tilted its head and sniffed the air like a hungry dog. Then it arched its back and wailed. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, teeth grinding, bone-chilling. It opened its wide mouth and I saw death. "Meat," it rasped. I threw the trash bag at it. The bag hit the creature in the chest, spilling rib bones and paper towels. The distraction worked for a second. All 3 fell upon the ribs and garbage in a frenzy. I could hear them snapping the bones with loud crunches. "Run!" I screamed. We sprinted through the dark woods, tripping over roots, slamming into saplings, tearing our clothes on briars. Behind us, the snapping of bones stopped. Then came the shrieks, high-pitched sounds somewhere between a coyote howl and a sobbing child. They were crashing through the brush behind us. They were fast, so incredibly fast. We burst onto the logging road just as I threw the keys to Jess. We dove into the Jeep. She slammed the locks just as something heavy slammed into the rear window. The glass spider-webbed but held. Jess peeled out, spraying dirt and gravel. In the red glow of the taillights, I saw them. The tree line was filled with them. Some stood in the middle of the road, perfectly still, just watching. There were so many. More than 3. More than 10. Shapes shifting between the trees. We drove in silence until we reached the highway. We didn't report it. Who would believe us? We told our friends we got spooked by a cougar. But I looked at the map again today. I checked the timeline of the disappearances. Most of them happen in the summer. Memorial Day, the 4th of July, Labor Day. Holidays when people go outside, when people light fires, when people cook meat. I used to think the maps overlapped because people were falling into holes. But that's not it. The sinkholes aren't just holes in the ground. They're ventilation shafts. And when we play and laugh and cook barbecues, we're ringing the dinner bell. I awoke, my vision blurry. The room around me was dark, and the only source of light seemed to be a lone candle upon the dark mahogany table in front of me. I was strapped to my seat, and I couldn't move. There was one other chair to my left with no one in it. There was no light and simply one door across from me. I yelled out for help, but received no response. I shuffled in my chair, hoping it might move or, better yet, topple over. It stood fast, and I realized I was stuck there. I called out again with panic growing in my voice. "Hello? Is anyone here?" After a few minutes, I heard a muffled voice finally respond. "Just a moment, my dear. Dinner's almost ready," the person said. The voice sounded male, but I could tell little else about him. I also could not recall how I came to be here. All I knew, my head was pounding, and the last thing I remembered was having drinks with my friends for girls' night. I'd not been out of the house since my mother passed away last month, and they all agreed I needed to get out of my head for a little while. At that particular moment, all I wanted was to get out of the chair. I tried moving again, and a pain pulsed from under my legs. I cringed as it shot up my thigh. I tried to lean back to see the cause, but I was bound too tightly. I cried out for help again, but my pleas were cut short as the door swung open and light filled the room. A tall, pale man stepped out from what appeared to be a kitchen. The fluorescence behind him blinded me from his appearance to begin with, but he soon stepped in to allow the door to close. "Ah, good. You're awake. I'll bring you some wine," the man said. His black hair had been slicked back, and he wore a white double-breasted jacket with an apron wrapped around his waist. He disappeared again to the kitchen, only to return a few moments later with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. He set them adjacent to one another and filled them carefully. Then he lifted the bottle slightly and turned the label toward me. "This is Pinot Noir, 1956. It'll pair very well with our meal, and I hope you enjoy them both." He looked down at my secured frame. Then he tapped his palm against his head, as if he had forgotten before stating, "Well, silly me, you'll need help with your drink." He picked up the glass and brought it to my lips. I turned my face away and stared intently at him from my peripheral. "What the hell is this?" I growled. He set the glass down and wiped his hands on a small black and white hand towel that rested at his hip. He gave a disappointed sigh while leaning down. I felt his fingers brush against my cheek, but I quickly pulled away. "Well, you see, I do enjoy cooking. I always have, but I'm told I'm not very good at it," he said while emoting with his hands. "I usually stick to the simple recipes, and I am working on perfecting them." "Well, I know you want to know what we're having, but you'll just have to be patient. I'd really hate to ruin the surprise." The words fell from his lips easily, and as soon as they were done, he turned to walk away. The whole thing unnerved me. He sounded too comfortable and must have done this all before. Before I could speak again, he had faded into the kitchen. I began looking around the room for any possible means of escape, but all I could see was the table set in the candle. There were 2 windows, but large crimson curtains covered them and let no light through. I tried to move the chair once more, and again I felt pain pulse through my lower body. The chair wasn't moving, and I couldn't stand trying to make it. My chest became tight, and I felt as though I might hyperventilate. My captor arrived again, pushing a service cart with a silver tray that was covered. He moved the tray from the cart to the table before pushing the cart to the side. His hand reached for the covering, lifting it quickly and shouting in a fake Italian accent, "Voila!" My eyes shifted to the dish that revealed pale, winding noodles knotted into a pile with red, chunky sauce that included ground meat. I looked up at him, my eyes furrowed, and noticed he was giving me the cheesiest grin I'd ever seen. "Well, I hope you like it," he beamed. "It's my best dish." I don't know what made this man think I would be putting anything that he brought to me in my mouth. But within minutes, he was wrapping strands of pasta around a fork and guiding it to me. I turned away again before speaking. "I'm not eating that." I quickly closed my lips together and cut my eyes at him. He lowered the fork, and his smile faded. "Well, I think you would like it if you just tried it," he murmured. "It's good, I promise. If you don't believe me..." He paused and pushed the fork into his mouth. He chewed for a moment before speaking again. See? It's delicious. He scooped more onto the fork and twisted the strings around again and leaned toward me. "No," I yelled. "Just get me out of this chair and get me out of this place." The fork was set upon the plate and his hands rested on his hips. "How about this?" he mused. "If you'll take a few bites of my pasta, I'll let you up from the chair." His tone raised to signify a question along with his eyebrows. I had no real way to make him let me go, and maybe this was my only way out. "Well," he interrupted, his voice growing more annoyed. "Fine," I said with a sigh of defeat. I'd given in, and I could only hope that this wouldn't be my last meal. He clapped his hands together and gave a little giggle before turning to grab the fork again. The sauce dripped from the thin strands of pasta as it came closer. Just the sight of it in his hands made my stomach turn a little. I opened my mouth slightly and he placed the portion within. I closed my mouth and my eyes at the same time and prayed to myself. It rolled about between my teeth for a moment. When I opened my eyes, he was giving me that stupid grin again. I chewed every bit and swallowed, and he went for another forkful. He brought it quickly and pressed it toward my face. I hesitated, but this honestly was the best spaghetti I'd ever eaten. After I consumed half the plate, I finally remembered that the whole point was to taste it in order to be set free. "Okay, it was good, but I would really like to be out of this chair now," I said sternly. "All right. Well, I guess a deal is a deal." He approached and removed the straps holding my upper body to the back of the chair, and then knelt down to release my legs. A sound of metal clanking was heard. I could only assume he was unfastening whatever held the chair in place first. Then I could feel his hand brush against my thigh as the binding across my legs was loosened and allowed to fall to the side. As soon as I was free, I attempted to stand up. Hot, searing pain echoed up from my legs to my spine. Now that I was loose, I could move back enough to see why. Long strips of my skin and muscle had been removed from my thigh region and had been covered slightly with bandages. The cloth had soaked through with my blood, but I could tell the wound was deep. "I'm sorry," he frowned. "The numbness will wear off in a few hours. I accidentally used too much anesthetic. I have always been bad with measurements." I touched my bandages, my legs not wanting to move. "Why? What is this? Who are you? Oh my God, my legs!" The man simply dried his hands on the towel again and watched me, his face expressionless. When I noticed him staring at me, I leaned forward and shouted, "What have you done to me?" He stepped forward and picked up the plate. He began taking bites of it. "I told you I'd been trying to perfect my cooking." The words were slightly garbled since he was speaking through mouthfuls of pasta. Then a thought crept slowly into my head. The entire time I'd been devouring the delicacy, I'd not even considered that it hadn't smelled like any spaghetti I'd ever had, and it definitely didn't taste the same. My eyes slowly widened and I could feel the vomit rising in my throat. I hunched over and the rancid dinner splattered across the floor. The man jumped back from the mess quickly and set the plate on the cart. "Did my spaghetti not agree with your stomach?" he asked as he rushed to wipe the remnants off my face. "Don't worry, there is plenty more. And since you won't be going anywhere anytime soon, why not just have a few more bites?" The question came with that same sick smile. I spat at him and tumbled to the floor. My body screamed as I slammed hard onto the wooden ground. "No, I'm getting out of here. I'm going home and you're going to regret this." He smiled at me and came closer. He picked up the chair and placed it back at the table, then leaned over to try to help me up. But I refused. "The deal was I would let you out of the chair. I never said anything about letting you go." Then he turned and walked back toward the kitchen. As he passed through the door, I began to crawl after him. The wood splintered into my knees, and my muscles cried for me to stop. The door shut in front of me, and when I reached out to press on it, I heard the distinctive sound of metal sliding against metal. He had locked it. When I turned back toward the window, I heard the man speak again from the other side. "Oh, don't bother with the windows. They've been barred shut. You might as well sit back down at the table and finish your food." That was a week ago. As I finished my story, the detective sat scribbling notes in a pad beside my hospital bed. I lay there covered from the neck down in bandages. The pen stopped moving long enough for him to ask, "So, how did you escape?" "Well, he took a little from me each night and I thought I was going to die. I lost consciousness and when I woke up, I'd been dropped off here. He asked if I could remember where I was and I simply shook my head. I'd been unconscious coming and going from the place. "Why do you think he let you go then?" he asked. I thought for a moment and said the only thing I could possibly think of. He needed fresh meat. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his jacket in the closet, doesn't say anything, and walks slowly to his room, which is normal enough. I've been living with him for about 3 months, long enough for me to pick up on most of his tendencies. The guy really doesn't talk unless spoken to, which was far from a problem for me. He also genuinely kept things clean on his end, never causing much in the way of problems. So I just go back to watching YouTube. About 5 minutes later, I hear the shower in his room turn on. Once again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing highlights, with my eyes half open, maybe 1 or 2 minutes away from passing out. I remember waking up in darkness, my head hurting and my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the grogginess to settle into something manageable. Once it did, I grabbed my phone to check the time. Around 3:30 a.m. From what I remember, I was starving, so I got up and began walking towards the fridge, and then I noticed it, a soft but ever-present noise in the background. It took me a few seconds to really recognize what it was. It's the shower. Suddenly, the events of last night began replaying in my head. Drinking at the bar, Ubering home, laptop, couch, my roommate coming home, the shower turning on. So I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. Maybe he went to bed and forgot to turn it off. I shook my head. No way that would happen. I thought maybe he slipped and fell, but realizing the implications of this, I rushed towards his room. I found his bathroom door locked. I began pounding on it. "Hey, man. Hey, are you all right?" No response. I considered kicking the door down, but decided to call 911 before I did that. I took my phone out, preparing to dial, when I noticed that I had an unread text from my roommate. "Hey, man, I couldn't sleep, so I went over to my girlfriend's place. Not sure when I'll be back." That was sent 2 hours ago. I looked at the bathroom door, then back down at my phone. Everything about this was wrong. Okay, first of all, my roommate barely texts me, certainly never to tell me that he is going out. Second of all, I know for a fact that he's single. He has been for a while. And third of all, who the hell was in the shower? Then I tried calling him. No answer. I sent him some texts. No response. I walked over to his desk and saw that his keys and wallet were still beside his laptop. My head's starting to spin at this point and I get out of there. I go back into the living room and I turn on the lights. I'm pacing around in a circle trying to follow the plot while also trying to ignore the shower noise, a noise I could have never imagined being so dreadful in any context. But sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I move toward it and I see that it's a phone. It's my roommate's phone. The panic begins setting in. Immediately, I grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I make my way down the hall and take the stairs down to the lobby, but even that doesn't seem far enough away. I make my way over to the McDonald's across the street. I sit there for a while considering calling the cops, but for some reason I feel too nervous to do so. Even though there's hardly anybody in there, the place begins to feel suffocating. I decide to leave, walking back out into the empty streets. Almost immediately, I get this feeling that I'm being watched. I feel my gaze drifting up and towards the apartment. Soon I'm looking at my balcony, and I see somebody standing there. A dark figure stood completely straight, stiff to the point where it nearly resembles a mannequin. But it isn't. If I look closely, I can see it just slightly swaying. I'm frozen in place, my mind hardly able to understand or accept what I was seeing. It's not my roommate. It's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anybody I know, its head nearly scraping the bottom of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any of its details. The darkness and the distance may have been enough to explain that away, but there was something about it that drove me towards a conclusion. This thing simply possessed no details that could have been observed. The only element of its composition was that of unadulterated darkness. Of course, my gut instinct was to get the hell away from it, but the voice in my head was telling me that if I were to try and run, this thing would end up following me. So I went back to the McDonald's instead, locking myself in the bathroom as I finally dialed 911. I told the operator that somebody had broken into my apartment, but that I had gotten out of there without them noticing and they were still in there. It was the story that most accurately represented the situation without making me come across as batshit crazy. The operator told me they'd be sending somebody over and for me to hang tight. I left the bathroom, waiting at the table closest to the exit until I could see the red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. I went outside to meet the cops, looking up at the balcony to find it empty, though the door to the living room had been left open. They pelted me with a bunch of questions that I found difficult to answer. Is the intruder armed? Do I have any idea who it might be? What are their intentions? I told them I didn't know. I couldn't figure it out. But they just kept on asking, so soon I was practically yelling at them to go up there and check it out for themselves. I suppose the terror in my voice was enough for them to begin taking it seriously. They told me to wait by the entrance, and I watched on as they entered the building. I was out there for a long time, growing increasingly anxious at the thought of what they were going to tell me when they came down. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a single muffled gunshot. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I continued to wait there, unsure of what to do otherwise. 20 more minutes of silence, and the officers still hadn't come down. Soon I could hear more of them approaching in the distance. Before I knew it, 4 more cop cars had pulled up around me, and the scene had fallen into chaos. Officers were shouting over each other into their radios. More questions were being hurled my way, none of which I was able to answer. The next few sequences were mostly a blur, but I remember the building being evacuated, the tenants frightened and confused as they were ushered outside while the officers became more and more frantic. I remember hearing more scattered gunshots, some screaming, and other noises that were difficult to make sense of. There were a few lapses in my memory after that, but I recall being pushed into the back of a police car. After being driven to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms where I found 2 nondescript men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately went into a series of questions, each one more bizarre than the last. What company was your roommate employed by? What was the nature of their job? How many different people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m., voices that didn't belong to your roommate? Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m., people that were exceptionally tall? And one of the most unsettling ones. Have you ever seen somebody standing at the foot of your bed upon waking up between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m., only for them to disappear moments later? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinct features? As they continued probing me, my mind began conjuring up some of the strange crap that had happened after my roommate had moved in. Crap that I had written off as figments of my imagination simply because I had no other explanation for them. I did hear the voices, always coming from the room next to mine when my roommate slept. I was always so tired when I heard them, but I do remember it sounding like either a young woman or a man with an extremely deep voice. I could never make out any words. It always sounded like gibberish. And then there was that one time where I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, still half asleep. I didn't bother turning the lights on as I entered, but as my eyes began adjusting to the darkness, I could have sworn that somebody was already sitting on the toilet. Somebody extremely tall. Of course, when I turned on the lights, there was nothing there. It was easy to chalk it up as a product of late-night drowsiness at the time. I've never really thought about it since. After doing my best to give them useful information, the suits spent a good few minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they sat up quickly and told me they'd be in touch. They left the room. A cop came in a few minutes later and told me that since I couldn't return to the apartment, they'd set me up in a nearby hotel until they were able to get the situation under control, and that I should stay put until they gave me a call. "What happened?" I asked him. "What did you guys find up there?" He stared at me for a long time, not as if he were deep in thought, but as if he held deep aversions for what he was considering telling me. Eventually, he just shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "I mean, I really don't know. It's the next day now, and I'm in the hotel. Of course, I couldn't sleep, couldn't really eat. The officer hasn't called me yet. When I tried searching up information about the evacuation on the internet, all I could find were articles claiming that it was due to a gas leak. A damn gas leak. Update. I fell asleep and I just woke up. It's 1 a.m. now. I can hear the shower running in the room next door, and I'm the only one here." "Hello, I'm Mr. Well Done. I watched the copulation which conceived you. Then I screamed in horror. I saw you birth like a hatched parasite, hairless and gagging, and I gritted my teeth and hatred sliding them over each other again and again and again and again and again until they were flat and smoothen. I watch you wither and grow old as your body congeals, and the weight of your years pulls your flesh from your body. Anna, I'll grin and snicker, laugh. I'll see your desiccated corpse, pumped full of superficial chemicals, entered into the dirt to feed the eyeless subterranean creatures of the earth. And how? Because I know where you're going. I know where you're going. I know the secrets of this earth as I knew the secrets of the one before it. I'll bring about the end, and you cannot stop me. You listen to these tales, and you don't know that each one that you hear, each one that you create and recreate with each one, that you retell with each one that you claim ownership of, you beckon the end. There will be some among you who try to verify experience. You'll seek them out. Those that do so with passion will find that many of them are falsehoods, but some will be harrowing at the very least. Others will leave you scarred for the rest of your fleeting days. Others will leave you stripped of your flesh, and that flesh will be used to build more and more and more tales, twisted and stretched to cry out to more curious individuals. And I will smile, and my teeth clench together, tightly, 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 until one cracks with a satisfying pop, my eyes unblinking, watching everything fall into place wide and empty, weeping and shriveling with delicious, protracted agony. I'm so excited, so very excited. Even as you listen, some among you are emboldened. The sick part of you, which lusts for the end, whispers into your mind, making you want to see the horror, the pain, the blood, the death. You want to see it. You want to see what lies hidden in the dark, beyond sight, smell, taste, hearing, in touch. Come and say, I will show you such a wonderful thing. Hello, it's not what you cannot see in the dark that you fear. It seems that the masses have conformed themselves with the trite statement. People fear the unknown. Humanity finds a strange comfort in a statement. If people did indeed fear the unknown, the statement would be akin to locking eyes and spirit with the soul-rendering horror which lurks unseen in the back of every human's mind. No, it's not what you cannot see in the dark that you fear. It's what you will see if you gaze long and hard into it. You'll see the thing you know. You will attempt to assuage that sting or fear in your mind by normally assuring yourself that it's simply a figment of the rampant facilities of the subconscious. But there is not. It's not. Yes, we fear the dark for a reason. The reason is not what you think it is. Hello, many fellows in their markedly less than infinite wisdom choose to prove their gender and sexual orientation by seeking out a locale rumored to be frequented with the events of the supernatural. What a loathsome and paradoxical term. Supernatural. How can a thing be above nature when it occurs naturally? But I digress. Many such brave souls who seek out in search of the nocturnal thrills of the unknown find that it is little to fear despite the cold sweat they feel, and choose to take this evidence as the answer to whether or not the supernatural exists in our shared perception of the world. What fools indeed if one steels themselves over much. Such an individual may find that he or she never will see anything beyond the mundane. It is those that embrace their fear that find much more startling evidence supporting the possibility of earthly entities and energies beyond our current understanding. Fear is more than a biological warning to impending danger. It is a sense little different than the 5 most people are familiar with: to ignore. One's fear is to ignore one's eyes to such secrets possessed of beauty and beyond most mortals' imaginations. And so I impart this advice upon those who wish to confirm the existence of the supernatural. Exalt yourself in your fear and seek out the darkness. You will see such wonderful things. Hello. Most of all, the most wonderful things to be seen in this world, the best of them lie in the periphery of the worldly, the superficial, the mundane, the worthless, the depletion, wretched, horrid, loathsome, hated, despicable, sickening, vapid reality which humanity clings to. Pardon me, but in the corners of the eye, my unknown gems. And it's the refuse, those fitting shapes, humanity unconsciously assigns readily explainable, acceptable normalities of the social world, leaving us with a vague fear that begs our eyes to close so very tightly when the lights are put down for an evening's rest, and not to open again until reassuring light of the morning dispels the possibilities of the darkness. What waste, what ridiculousness. Open your eyes, use the wondrous capabilities of those fantastic organs as you go about your evening hygienic rituals. I suggest you pay indirect attention to the coal black of the hallways waiting outside the door. Wait for the inevitable thing out of place with the characteristic stillness of the night swiftly passing by the unknown destinations. But do not acknowledge it. Do not. Some things are best only seen and not interacted with in other ways, for in seeing that which believes itself unseen, awareness comes for the most severe of consequences. Oh yes, so severe. Do not look, do not touch or speak or taste. Only then perhaps will you hear faintly on the first occasion, but on every occasion thereafter, impossible to ignore even as they stand now, so clearly leering at you from the darkest corners of your safest, most sacred havens. Do not acknowledge their presence. Be content to observe, yes, content. Such contentedness is the only barrier between you and predation. If you can do this, if one can stand the temptations of the darkness and control one's primordial self, perhaps then you'll be prepared for more, much more. Hello, tales of strange creatures, occurrences and sightings persist from the first days of man until now. To discard them out of hand is foolishness, as is to believe blindly. But for those that scout the dark, You will find horrors which will shatter the mind, simple human mind. There was once a time when man understood his place in the universe. Things changed. Things change, always changing. Though, even in recent history, there's been those that have understood. However, such individuals, wise in their pursuits, turn to examine the mundane reality of nature rather than its unexplainable qualities. What a waste! What a waste at least the bulk does not understand, which will never understand. There's only fear and blind denial, even when faced with old truths. The human mind shuts itself off, and the person attempts to desperately find any mundane explanation possible to retain sanity. The entity, the creature wholly wrought of comparison, and an end and worthless society. Only those bold enough to search in the dark, blind and senseless, will see the old truth. You will see. You will understand your place. You will experience feelings so powerful and varied that you will be unable to assign words to describe the experience, and then it will all end. Hello, can one be so simultaneously amused and disgusted? Apparently so humanity disgusts me for its constant squabbling over little pieces of paper, hierarchical conflicts for power that exists only in the imaginations of those involved, and the pointless use of life in order to sustain nothing but a paltry level of comfort. I am sickened, and yet I'm so entertained. It's like watching some sort of cruel joke unfold. I sit waiting for some among you to ascend to greater powers than known to the bulk of humanity. But so few are willing to aspire, so full of yourself, so assured that you already know the workings of the universe. You rob yourselves of the greatest of mysteries. I can't wait. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see it all. And I cannot wait to watch you scream and suffer, a magnificent din of flesh being stripped from bone, which is then made to dance to the whims of the most horrifying destruction. The sentient portion of the universe has borne witness to it. Will be a wonderful taste of vengeance for having been subjected to your monotony, that I still yearn for everyone armed only to obtain the eyes with which to see all of the cosmos. But I also yearn to pluck your organs from their positions of safe functioning simplicity, to relish the expression of pain and terror on your face. I wonder if I shall ever be so divided. I wonder what I shall do when such division ceases. I cannot wait. When I was 8 years old, my parents and I moved into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of a town I'd never heard of before. The houses were identical in a way that made it hard to tell which ones were ours at first. Same pale siding, same trimmed hedges, same mailbox posts painted the same dull green. The HOA president came by that afternoon. He introduced himself with a handshake that lingered too long, and a plastic container balanced in the crook of his arm. Inside was a cake that had been frosted to look fancy. But when my mom cut into it later, it tasted bland and artificial, sweet in the wrong way, like flavoring instead of food. He also handed my parents a packet of papers and stood on the porch while they skimmed through it. I remember most of it being boring. Rules about lawns, trash bins, noise complaints, outdoor decorations, how long cars could be parked on the street. Normal HOA stuff. Then my dad stopped flipping pages. I remember him rereading one line silently, his eyebrows pulled together. When I asked what it was, the HOA president laughed a little too fast and said it was just an old neighborhood joke. Nothing serious. My mom took the papers away. Later that night, I snuck the packet off the kitchen counter and read the part I'd seen my dad pause on. It was printed in the same font as everything else. Same size, same spacing, no bold letters or warnings. Don't let the midnight salesman in. That was it. No explanation, no context. Just sitting between a rule about patio furniture and another about window blinds. At exactly midnight, there were 3 knocks on our front door. Not loud, not soft, perfectly even, like someone tapping on a desk. My parents froze. My mom stood up and relocked the door despite it already being locked. Then the voice came through the wood. "Mr. and Mrs. Grayson, would you be interested in this product I'm selling? I must say it's an offer you can't refuse." His voice was calm and practiced, the way customer service workers talk when they're reading from a script. He didn't raise it. He sounded patient. No one answered. He stood there for exactly 5 minutes. I counted on the microwave clock in the kitchen. He kept talking the entire time, changing the wording slightly each night. Sometimes he said it was a solution, but it always started with our names. Always polite, always certain. When the 5 minutes were over, he stopped mid-sentence and left. There were never footsteps, just silence where he had been. This happened every night. Eventually, it became routine. Lights off by 11, curtains shut, TV muted. My parents whispered instead of talking. Sometimes I peeked through the blinds and saw porch lights turn off down the street, one by one, like the neighborhood was holding its breath together. One night I asked, "Why don't we just tell him to go away?" My mom didn't answer at first. She kept her eyes on the dark window, watching our reflection instead of the street outside. "Because we don't talk to him," she said finally. "That's the rule." "But he's just standing there. He's not doing anything weird." My dad turned the volume on the TV down another notch, even though it was already barely audible. "You don't know that," he said quietly, "and neither do we. So for now, just do what you're told." "He knows our names," I whispered. "How does he know our names?" Neither of them responded. My mom reached over and squeezed my knee too hard, like she was trying to physically keep me still. "You don't open that door," my dad said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tight, controlled. "You don't answer him. You don't look at him. You don't think of him. You stay away from the front of the house after midnight. Do you understand me?" After a few weeks, the fear turned into something else. Curiosity, frustration. I was tired of hiding, tired of being quiet in my own house. So one night, before my mom could grab my arm, I walked to the door and unlocked it. The salesman was standing just outside the reach of the porch light. He looked normal. Too normal. Clean clothes, neatly combed hair, empty hands. No bag, no clipboard, nothing to prove he was selling anything at all. Before I could say a word, my dad rushed forward and shoved me backwards into the hallway, hard enough that I fell. The salesman didn't even glance at me. His eyes locked onto my father instead, and his smile widened slightly. He said my dad's name like he'd known it for years. I don't know what was said outside. The door closed behind them and the wind started immediately, rushing through the trees so hard the windows rattled. The pressure in my ears made everything feel underwater. It only lasted a few seconds. When my dad came back inside, he was carrying an expensive towel warmer. He held it against his chest like it mattered, like it was important. He walked past us without speaking and sat down on the couch. "Dad?" He didn't look at me. My mom stepped in front of him and crouched down so her face was level with his. "Hey, talk to me, honey. What did he say to you?" No response. She touched his arm and gave it a small shake. "You're scaring me. Say something. Anything." He blinked slowly but didn't react. His eyes stayed open, unfocused, like he was staring through the wall instead of at it. I moved closer and waved my hand in front of his face. "Dad, please stop. This isn't funny." My mom grabbed his shoulders and shook him harder now. "Look at me, Henry. Look at me." His head moved with her hands, but his eyes didn't follow. I remember my mom's voice breaking when she said his name again and again, getting louder each time like volume alone might pull him back. "Call 911, she said suddenly. I ran to the kitchen phone with my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Behind me, my dad sat perfectly still on the couch, holding the towel warmer like it was the last thing he had been told to keep. At the hospital, the doctors told us there was no physical damage, no stroke, no trauma, no tumors. His brain scans were clean. One of the neurologists spoke to my mom in a quiet consultation room while I sat on the paper-covered exam table, swinging my legs. Structurally, his brain looks normal, the doctor said. There's no sign of hemorrhage, ischemia, swelling, or mass effect. His MRI and CT are also unremarkable. My mom gripped the edge of the chair as she cried. Then why won't he do anything? Well, we're seeing electrical activity on the EEG. Basic cortical function is present. Reflexes are intact. Pupillary response is normal. But he isn't producing any form of purposeful movement or speech. So he's in a coma? The doctor shook her head. Not exactly. He's awake. His eyes are open. Sleep-wake cycles are present. What's missing is meaningful interaction with the environment. She paused before continuing. It suggests a severe disruption in the networks that connect sensory processing to motor response. In simple terms, his brain is receiving information, but it isn't translating that input into intentional action. Can it heal? My mom asked. Can he be fixed? There's no visible injury to recover from, the doctor said quietly. That's what makes this difficult. We can't point to a damaged area, and that means we don't know how to treat it. She hesitated before adding one last thing. It's extremely rare to see this in patients without trauma, which means we don't have a clear explanation. He never really came back. He still sat in the living room sometimes, still somehow ate if food was placed in front of him, still breathed, but nothing inside him mattered anymore. It was like the salesman had taken whatever part of him made him him. He stayed in that house even after I left. I left for college when I was 18. I went to a state school a few hours away and studied something practical because I didn't know what else to choose. I avoided talking about my dad. When people asked why I never went home for holidays, I said there had been a medical emergency and left it at that. I started seeing a therapist during my second year because I kept waking up at midnight for no clear reason. We talked about trauma and anxiety, how kids can internalize things and blame themselves for things they had no control over. I never mentioned the salesman. Some things felt safer staying unnamed. My mom kept my dad in assisted care while I was gone. I helped pay when I could. There were specialists, rehabilitation programs, quiet hospital rooms that all blended together after a while. When I visited, I talked anyway, about classes, about dumb campus problems, about the weather. He never answered. Sometimes I thought his eyes followed me when I stood up to leave, but the nurses said it was involuntary. Eventually, I stopped asking. I met my wife during my last year of college. We started studying together and slowly built something normal. First, I told her my family situation was complicated. Later, I told her about my dad, about the silence, about the house. She didn't push for details I wasn't ready to give. When we got married and talked about where to live, I told her anywhere that wasn't my childhood neighborhood. She agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, my mom couldn't afford to move, and she was afraid to leave. The knocking never came again after that night, but the rule was still there, sitting in the HOA packet in a drawer, untouched, waiting. Yesterday, my mother passed away. I spent the day signing papers, making phone calls, packing hospital belongings into plastic bags. When I came home, the house felt bigger than it ever had before. Too quiet. No monitors, no murmured conversations. Just empty rooms and furniture that suddenly belonged to no one. The house is in my name now. While going through the filing cabinets, I found the old HOA packet. The pages were yellowed. The rules were still there, exactly the same. Don't let the midnight salesman in. It's almost 11:30. I work in security at Disney World, the happiest place on Earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work. There are pretty strict rules about things employees can put online, but I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me with this job anyway. I just can't see myself working here any longer. I've been with the company for about 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters, rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually keep it pretty mild. The heat and walking were getting too much for me the last few years, so I had to be transferred somewhere with AC. The company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were much better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestic disputes. I suppose the expenses and stress of vacation get to a lot of people. I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I'd try to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit. That would usually calm things down. But none of that's what I'm here for. See, I have to get this out while I still have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently, a couple of days before that, housekeeping had gone into a room that shouldn't have been turned over that day. Turning over is when one guest leaves around 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. But all the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. During the next 2 days, when they entered the room again, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, toys, everything a family would need for a vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was a family. Dad, mom, 2 kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was voicemail. We were all a bit stumped, so I made the call that housekeeping could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed, so I took a quick walk through the parking lot and easily located their vehicle. That ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. When a guest prepays for all their food, they're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared the day they arrived they got here late and probably just stayed at the resort. The next day they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day they used 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. At Disney, we have something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by guests. They act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, fast pass system to bypass lines, and a whole lot more than that. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to the Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, then rode their last ride. It's a small world at 11 a.m. Then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring someone else in on this, so I called an old co-worker at the Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull up security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it. I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he found. There was a camera facing the direction where the ride loads and unloads. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use FastPass for the ride and then boarding. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their boat exiting. They weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and the mom and dad got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or stuck somewhere in the machinery. So we shut down the ride in the middle of the day, turned off that earworm music, and turned up the lights. My buddy and I walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there were close to 10 cast members searching. We didn't find anything except 3 cell phones and a hat. I've been digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next. I called the police, and I suppose they're on their way, but the company has a way of covering things like this up. I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. They keep digging into their reservations over the last couple of days, and today I noticed that they had purchased Memory Maker. Those are the photographers all over the park and the cameras on a lot of the rides. With the whole Memory Maker thing, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest's Disney account when the system knows their picture's been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. I opened up their Memory Maker photo album. I swear there were like 732 pictures. The first 30 or so were pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides, pictures in front of the big sphere. But the rest were all in It's a Small World. The ride only takes 1 picture per trip, so it appears as though the family had been riding this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and they just looked a little confused. In the next 10 to 15 pictures, I could see the dad getting angry, yelling. The mom was holding on to the 2 kids like her life depended on it. You could see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying. And it goes on and on. After about 50 pictures, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone, like they bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next picture, they're all right back in the same boat. After around 450 pictures, I can only see the mom and kids. When I look closely, I can see the dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Around picture 675, there's just the mom and 1 kid. Another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think they're still alive, but nearly catatonic, just staring straight ahead, pale. And I swear on my life, the dolls are moving. They're doing something in some of these pictures. I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll sitting in the boat with the family. I couldn't look anymore. I thought I was going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. The file size had increased since I closed it. God, new pictures are being added. I can see on the security cameras that the local police just arrived, so they're taking over soon. I wish I knew what the hell was going on, but I also wish this thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this, but after I talk to the police, I think I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some cover story about why a whole family vanished. Because they didn't vanish. I know where they went.